Take a chance on me. United we will bleed. You gave me a reason to fight once again. We stand together, we'll stand till the end. Through all the pain, I know this is worth dying for. We are the sword. As one's blood, we will fight. We will make it out. Bruising better, we will battle till the morning sun will rise. We are the sword.
War.
Alone we're just as one, but unified with your light, we can shine in the dark. You gave me a reason to fight for the truth, not just for us, but for others abused. We will defend the defenseless as the rain pours. We are the sword. As one's blood, we will fight. We will make it out. Bruising better, we will battle till the morning sun will rise. We are the sword.
War.
Gave me a reason to fight once again. We're on the front line, still marching in.
Love.
Gave me a reason to survive and win. You gave us a reason to fight.
War.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Procedurally Barred. This is Obi-Wan Benobi. As with me always is Emma.
Hi there.
We begin today with the German Part 2, Eva's Doubt and Retraction.
Okay. Many say the fact that Eva was found to be living with Siegfried after the events of 2005 and 6 show she was happy to re-enter a relationship with him and therefore could not think badly of him. Eva explains that she was only living with him because she had been court ordered to take responsibility for him. When he entered the US, Eva signed a contract saying that she would provide for him during his time in the US. She was told failure to house him and pay his bills would result in her going to jail. She can be linked to Siegfried until 2008, when he was detained in Pittsburgh. She describes this time very negatively and expressed her wish to leave him many times, including to Michael Griesbach. Now, Michael Griesbach in his book explains that Eva was trying to escape and go to Oregon. Michael Griesbach knew of Eva's wishes to leave. He agreed to keep Siegfried in prison long enough to allow her that opportunity. So many people cast doubt over Eva, and there's an implication that she must be lying because the following year she's found living with him, which people have interpreted as Eva, by her behaviour, admitting that she was lying about what she said in 2005 and 2006. Ben, what's your take on this?
Well, in my opinion, I mean, it's quite common that, I mean, when you're with an abuser or a partner who's abusive, and who has past history of domestic abuse, I mean, it's common that women usually either, get back with their abuser, or they try to work things out. And several times, I mean, it might take, what's the statistics, like 7 out of 7 times. I mean,
7 times.
It takes a woman 7 times, 8 times to actually move forward and go on without him. But I mean, I don't know what to make of it. I mean, she's been with him several different times. I mean, she's left him several times. I'm sure of that. I'm sure that these incidences that had occurred happened before, and in the beginning of the relationship or whatnot. I mean, I'm sure that this is something that's a continuance. I mean, it's something that continues to happen. So I don't know. I really don't know.
And she doesn't ever speak about her time with Siegfried in a positive way. She doesn't speak about them having a good, loving, healthy relationship. She always speaks about the times when he hurt her and attacked her, and the way that he wouldn't work. He wanted Eva to pay for everything. And, the way that she speaks about it in such a way that that it was never a happy time for her. So
I mean, when you're in a relationship, you expect your partner to help out. I mean, sometimes you might have children, and the wife might be a stay-at-home mother or something like that, and usually the guy ends up being the breadwinner. But oftentimes, there's women that's the breadwinner, but I mean, this guy was, I'm sorry to say, but lazy. I mean, he didn't want to work. He didn't want to go out and find a job or hustle to find work. But that takes a toll on a woman. I mean, a woman looks to a man for support, financial stability, and if you're not pulling your own weight, it ain't gonna work out.
Yeah, exactly. So the fact that she was found living with him after she told police she thought that he'd killed Teresa Halbach or was somehow involved, that's not a surprise. Even on just the domestic violence element of it alone, people go back. There are so many times when police want to charge the abusive partner but can't, because the witness is the wife who doesn't want to press charges. So on just like the domestic abuse side of it, the fact that she was found living with him later doesn't tell me that she was lying about what she said. It tells me that she, for whatever reason, decided that she'd have to take him back. And then the fact that court order comes into play when she says the police delivered Siegfried to the door with a court order saying she had to take responsibility for him. It was, you have to let this man in. You have to let him live in your house. You have to pay his bills. You have to financially take care of him, or you're going to jail.
Yeah, I don't know how that all works out with, I mean, bringing somebody over that's an immigrant, I mean, it's she'd obviously would have had to sign documents and to allow him into the country. I know he can get like a work visa and stuff, but he didn't really work. But I mean, she assumed the responsibilities to bringing him over, and therefore, I believe she may have been stuck. I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah.
But
And I
doesn't
think
technically mean that she wasn't afraid for her life or afraid for her safety. I mean, of course, if you're in a domestic abusive relationship, it's hard, So it's not like she wasn't afraid. I'm sure no woman is gonna feel safe with someone who's abusive and continuously to like abuse or mentally abuse them. It's not ideal,
No. And I think she even describes it as it took me another 2 years to get free of him. That doesn't imply that she's happy and she was sad that he got deported. That says, I was stuck with him for another 2 years.
It's we know when she went into the Maribel property, she went there to get away from him. Her intentions weren't for him to move in with her. He may have but I believe that she may have kept that from him and may have not tipped him off to where he thought that he wasn't going to be moving in there. I think that in his eyes, they were moving into that place together. But if you look at the events and what had transpired, she knew his visa and his documents were in the house. There's documents where they say that he was, when he got arrested, they actually brought him into the house and he was looking, or he was, the police allowed him to go through a few rooms to look for these documents in which they couldn't find, So he asked them to look in like cupboards and dresser drawers and stuff like that. And here the police are going from room to room looking for these documents, which they couldn't locate. But then he ends up, unfortunately, going to prison. And then, well, fortunately, going to prison. And then he gets out and he goes back to go get these documents.
Yeah.
And that's where, obviously the police paid for his transportation to get there, and then they bring him to the house.
Yeah. So I think we've cleared up here the fact that one of the arguments against Eva is she was found to be living with him. I think we've given an explanation as to why she was found to be living with him. So you want to move on?
Mm-hmm. Doubt. Eva's statement and character have been called into question many times, or by many. They say that she has a history of court orders and a current arrest warrant, and therefore she cannot be trusted. Eva defended herself by explaining the court orders as linked to previous properties where she left the lease early due to issues involving Siegfried. She explains the arrest warrant was due to a criminal or a case of animal neglect that she is not guilty of. She claims the neglect case was the result of state interference due to the Convoluted Brian article. Her requests for her files to pursue her claims Siegfried was involved in the disappearance of Teresa Halbach, and the fact that she has spoken to Laura Knight Rider. So, she actually was charged with animal neglect and animal abuse, and here they were trying to get her for basically starving these dogs. I don't know about the side where there was like actually animal abuse. I mean, abuse could be neglect as well, but I don't really see it like that. It's not like the dogs were being beaten and physically assaulted or anything like that, but they attempted to like charge her, and this went on for years, and it didn't seem like anything came of it. In fact, like up until just recently, within the last like few years, I mean, the warrant was actually still active, and I believe it can only last for so long. I don't know. Do you remember what year this was in?
Not sure of the year. I think I'll provide some links with some more information in on that, but I know that she's not got an arrest warrant out for her now. When it comes to the court orders about the previous properties, they'd lived in a couple of properties. They lived in the Maribel property. Prior to that, there was the Bonjewel house, and there was another house not far prior to that. And the first house they left because it wasn't as the ad had stated, and Siegfried wasn't happy. So they'd asked if they could leave the lease, and there was problems surrounding them leaving the lease, and they were taken to court for the outstanding rent for the rest of the lease.
Correct.
When they got to the next house, Siegfried wasn't happy because it didn't have any air conditioning. So he wanted to move again. So there was a couple of properties where they left the lease before the end of it and were taken to court for the remainder of the lease owed. So that's what the court orders were about.
Well, there were several other things too. There was lien, or like, I guess, collections, or what you would call what do you call that, when like some type of reimbursement. But he would literally like damage these properties. He would stay and move into these homes. They wouldn't pay rent. The landlord would obviously get upset, and then before moving out of the property, they would actually damage the home. And there was a lot of collections and liens against them, at which the landlord would, obviously try to take them to court. And
and rightly so, for damage and unpaid rent and things.
Right.
But that doesn't mean, just because Siegfried had a problem with the properties and wanted to leave the lease, that doesn't mean that Eva's lied later on when she said, I think he's involved with Teresa Halbach. It means that, again, it links back to the domestic abuse relationship. She was in it appears to be quite a controlling relationship. So it doesn't mean that she's of bad character because she's got a couple of court orders which she explains were linked to Siegfried, not her. But the leases all had to be taken out in her name. So that would be why Siegfried was unhappy with the properties, but Eva seemed to be the one responsible. So the court orders were against her. So that doesn't mean that she's of bad character. It doesn't mean that she's more likely to lie. So I don't think it's fair to say that a history of court orders means she can't be trusted. I think I don't see how that's fair. And the arrest warrant, there's quite a lot more coming out about that. Should we skip to the next slide?
Well,
And
I didn't know if you wanted to get into Leah Richmond, or do you want to talk about that later?
Well, I was thinking, let's read the email and then we can mention that, because it does talk about circumstances surrounding the dogs in the email. So shall
Okay.
we'll read the email and discuss that now. Right. This is an email. It's clearly been redacted. This is a communication between someone on Reddit and Eva. And this is Eva messaging the person from Reddit. And it says, I understand that. All I know is my life was very uneventful before marrying Siegfried, and became very uneventful after he was deported. Then I made the mistake of buying a house in Wisconsin in October 2010. And the next year speaking to Nora Ryder, Danny's attorney, who found me via Convoluted Brian, aka Brian McCorkle. Then my life got very bad again. I was in graduate school as an online program and caring for my dogs and remodeling my home in Wisconsin. I never went anywhere except appointments or shopping and knew barely anybody there. I was single all these years, dated no one. Nothing about me was remarkable. I had satisfied customers who bought dogs from me. I was a hobby breeder who also did rescue, but was not accepting any new rescues. I had invested money in some of the best breeding dogs. My dogs were healthy, etc. I have stacks of vet receipts. I had all new kennels built for them, and on and on. I have hundreds of photos for my dogs. I have their records. I have photos of the house and all the receipts from all the work done on it. So you can imagine my dismay up until now of what happened. I hired 2 lawyers at the time who were all gung-ho in the beginning and then seemed to turn around after talking to the county people. It was my own fault. Had I stayed away from Wisconsin and kept my mouth shut, I would still be going about my merry old life. I felt a compulsion to try to figure out what happened and if Siegfried had done it. I also felt angry, knowing that Manitowoc County knew I suspected him and knew I was afraid of him, but never told me they tested the items I gave them to exclude him. They just set him free to come after me again, and I went through hell for several more years. I also felt an obligation because of my main profession had been management in social services for the developmentally disabled, and I couldn't believe they forced a disabled boy to confess to that crime. I felt the police and the district attorney at the time, knowing what Siegfried had done to me and his history, had an obligation to at least assure me they had followed up on the leads and excluded him, so I would not fear him even more, but I heard nothing. Also, in 2012, Ken Kratz contacted me. Oh, hang on. Ken Kratz contacted me and claimed he was interested in purchasing a German Shepherd dog to train for personal protection. At first, he did not want to give his name, but I actually recognized his voice and asked him if it was Ken Kratz. And he said, why? Does it matter? Yes, I'm Ken Kratz. Does that make a difference? Anyway, I never met up with him. And when I declined, he sent me a nasty email saying he had read about me on the message boards. And he also left a nasty voicemail. Kratz was living about 30 miles away from me at the time. This talks about, very briefly, about what happened with her dogs. She requested her files, as she says Nora Ryder wanted her to do, and suddenly she gets this call from Kratz asking if he can have a dog and saying that he'd read about the article. What he is referring to here is the Convoluted Brian article. Within a matter of either days or weeks, her home was raided. Every single one of her dogs, not just the dogs that she was breeding, but her personal pets as well. They were all taken and divided up amongst, I think, 3 other rescues. And they shut her dog breeding business down. They put her on charges of animal abuse. The controversy surrounding that was quite big at the time on the dogs breeding boards, like the forums, where 2 of the rescues were saying these didn't look like abused dogs. They were healthy. They weren't hungry. They weren't violent. They didn't look abused. And one of the rescues was saying, oh, it's the most horrifying case of animal abuse we've ever been involved in. Now, Ben, what can you tell us about the person that was saying that?
Well, there was a guy named Leo Richmond. They were, I don't know if anybody remembers Leo Richmond, but he is a guy that had said that Teresa, he believes Teresa had visited him after she had supposedly disappeared, and that he had visited her home, knocked on the door in the middle of the night, and he believed that she was at the wrong address. But this guy actually worked and owned a dog breeding place for retrievers called Hearts of Gold. And they would have been in direct competition with Eva Berg and her business. And so they started reporting on her and calling her in about animal neglect and abuse, and basically got Manitowoc County involved in this. And then they go online to these different forums, like that Alpine K9 and many other forums. But I mean, they made her life a living hell on those forums, and constantly badgered and attacked her and did everything to defame her. I mean, it was just it was ridiculous. And I mean, a lot of these comments are still up. You can search them and look at them for yourselves. And it was just, it was pretty ignorant.
There was, as far as my understanding is, there was never any evidence supplied that Eva was neglecting or abusing any of the dogs. What everyone needs to take into account here, that the mere act of speaking to Convoluted Brian and applying for her files, she lost her home, her business, her dogs, her pets. She lost any and all respect that she had spent many years building up within the dog breeding community. She is still intensely vilified on these forums because no one likes an animal abuser. And she's been slated as something that she's not so much that people now automatically believe it. And those charges were dropped.
Dissolved.
She was never found guilty. 2 of the rescues that showed up that day said they could not find any evidence of abuse on the dogs that they had rescued. So, and again, she says here, I hired 2 lawyers at the time who were all gung-ho in the beginning, but then seemed to turn around after talking to the county people. She also speaks in this section about the time with Siegfried, and she doesn't speak about it very positively. She says, I went through hell for several more years. And she questions why they didn't at least investigate and exclude him so that she wouldn't fear him even more. And she speaks about Brendan. I couldn't believe they forced a disabled boy to confess to that crime. This email alone, to me, says a lot more about her character than any issues with past court orders, any issues with the animal abuse. She's saying here, my dogs were healthy. I've got stacks of vet receipts. I had all new kennels built for them. I've got hundreds of photos. I have their records. She doesn't come across to me in any of the emails that we've read that she's lying about this.
Absolutely.
And we're talking here, this is dated Friday, December 25th, 2015, Christmas Day in the morning. And she's saying, I felt the police and the district attorney at the time, knowing what Siegfried had done to me and his history, had an obligation to at least assure me they'd followed up on the leads and excluded him, so I wouldn't fear him any longer.
Yeah, and it was like she was trying to come forward about information, or at least trying to do the right thing and help, and they basically turned a blind eye to her, and then denied her. Like she fought for the records to prove that all this stuff happened when it did. You know, when she did hand over evidence, and then she gave them these statements back then when Teresa had disappeared. You know, she tried getting the records and they denied her, but it seemed to me like they were connecting with not just the dog breeding thing, but they were connecting her with Stephen Avery's case and this article that had written, and it was like they wanted to do everything to destroy her reputation, her credibility, her livelihood, everything. And
I'm quite disturbed by Ken Kratz's involvement here, and it says he sent me a nasty email saying he had read about me on the message boards, and he sent me a nasty voicemail. Now, did Kratz legitimately want a German Shepherd for personal protection, or was he just trying to get in with Eva?
Or intimidate her?
Yeah, exactly. You know, the fact that he's involving himself and then sending nasty emails and leaving nasty voicemails. Well, we all know about Kratz and messages, but, you know, she doesn't accuse anybody here. She doesn't call anyone names. She's quite eloquent about the way that she puts things. I don't think that she's the liar that she's been made out to be.
I don't think so either. In fact, the only people that I see that have any type of hostility are the ones that are creating these issues for her.
Mm. Yeah. You ready for the next one?
Mm-hmm.
That one's yours.
Retraction. In 2016, a blogger posted a statement from Eva in which she retracts her previous statements, says she did not and does not think Siegfried killed Teresa Halbach, and that she has asked Brian McCorkle to remove the article. Eva has reportedly been seen on various sites for groups who promote the state's narrative of Stephen Avery, where she says that the forensic evidence points to Stephen Avery as the killer. So despite her concerns at the time being enough that she reported it to the police and gave the interview for Convoluted Brian and asking Siegfried if he was involved, she has changed her mind.
No. My take on this, Ben, is this happened, this blogger post, we don't actually know that it was from Eva. It doesn't say who sent it. I mean, they do use the name Eva, but this goes so much against what we've heard from her up until this point. There's no way to know whether it's legitimate or not. We don't know the source of it. The blogger just says this is a statement from Eva. Comparing the idea of this statement with the email that you've just read, that we've just read, she's still saying in there that she thinks that Siegfried was still involved, and yet a year later she's apparently retracting it all. That doesn't seem to make sense, does it, Ben?
No, it doesn't. I mean, it seemed to have changed up into the point when Michael Griesbach created that book, Indefensible.
Yes.
But
yeah.
I believe that if it was her, the only reason the retraction probably occurred is because she wanted out of all the issues that were created from these people online attacking and harassing her, and going through this for several years on end. I think she just tried to salvage what little reputation she had left, and dignity, and she may have switched sides, you know. She may have switched sides just to lighten the blow. But
I'm going to be honest. If I'd been treated the way that that Eva had been treated by the state, I'd be going on the guilty pages shouting about Stephen's guilt, just because of the fear of what they were going to do next. They completely devastated this poor woman's life and portrayed her as sort of the evil villain in the whole scheme. And I don't blame her. If legitimately that was her on the guilty site, and it was her saying the forensic evidence points to Stephen, I don't blame her. I'd be doing the same.
Absolutely. I could imagine what it would have been to be pressured into that.
Yeah. You know, we're talking about a police force that followed her from one side of the US to the other. We're talking about unfounded allegations of abuse. She lost her home, her business, her respect. The abuse that she was getting from the other dog breeding boards was horrific. And I think she just wanted it to stop.
Well, I've actually spoken with Eva just recently, and she actually told me that she wasn't really pressured in to retracting the story, but in a way, she is still indicating that she believes Stephen Avery is actually innocent.
Yeah.
And she still speaks of Siegfried as though he still has an involvement of some sort in this. So it's kind of hard to say, you know. I believe that she may have been pressured, even though she might say that she wasn't pressured. But it just seems to me that it's really odd that right after Michael Griesbach created this book, which he basically created this book to disprove and discredit Eva Berg, but he didn't really do much of anything to prove that she was lying, you know.
But also, I think just because the state didn't sit her down and say, we're going to make your life a living hell, you think it's bad now, you wait until you see what we can do, unless you stop this. Just because the state didn't do that doesn't mean that she didn't feel under pressure to act, to get everyone to back off. She might have felt that retracting was her only way out.
And besides, we got to take into consideration as well that those charges were dropped and that warrant was lifted, and maybe that there was some type of deal struck where she would retract her story to make it seem less credible. Because when you really take Eva Berg's story into account, it's really, really hard to ignore.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, this story, I just don't see somebody just coming up with this. Yeah. Especially with the little bit of time frame that she had to have created this story, it would have been virtually impossible. And I mean, she had details, you know what I mean? Details that, I don't know, that nobody would know, you know?
I think we've made a compelling case here for Eva and how badly she's been treated and how badly people have thought about her without knowing the inside of the story. So for those, this video is aimed at those who just want to say, oh, Eva, oh, you can't believe anything that she says. Eva's been proven to be a liar. This video is aimed at those people who don't want to hear what she said.
She has a very, very important story to tell, and I don't believe that she's been given a fair shake by the community and even other support groups, like from various other domains. You know what I mean? Like the K9 community and the Stephen Avery community, Brennan Dassey community. I mean, I really don't think that she's been given a full shake, and I believe that people should listen to her story and give her a chance to be heard, you know?
Yeah.
And I wish she would come forward. I wish she would come forward and be able to talk publicly and answer anyone's questions, you know, that they may have.
I think we're dealing with a woman here who has been treated incredibly badly. And it strikes me, there's a film called Enemy of the State with Will Smith in it. And when sort of the government guys are out to get him, one of them uses the line, I want everyone to know that he's lying before he even opens his mouth.
Mm.
And I think that's what we're seeing here.
I know it's kind of crazy how a person like Michael Griesbach would, wait years after an article had been written in 2009 and then publish a book to discredit this. Obviously, this article wasn't important enough. It was important enough for the, I guess you could say, the state, because obviously Michael Griesbach is a main player of the state.
And then you've got Kratz involved as well. This article that Kratz waded in himself.
Mm-hmm. So there's a reason why they're trying to cover this up, or they don't want this talked about, or they don't want people looking and diving into this aspect of the case.
Mm.
But the events that transpired are true. They did happen. Eva did hand over evidence. She did give a formal statement, and she was, I guess you could say, interrogated, because she does claim to have went down there and sat where Brennan Dassey had sat and was interrogated and questioned by officers about what she believes occurred.
Yeah. And there's obviously quite an extent that's been gone to in order to make her look bad and in order to paint her as the villain of the piece here. And that one section of one of the emails that we've got, she's an intelligent, eloquent woman who describes how unremarkable her life was before Siegfried and afterwards, and how terrible it was in between, and how in 2015 she was saying, I can't believe they made that disabled boy confess to that crime.
And her character has always been proper, respectful, and you see a lot of people be uncivil and combative toward her and very rude and ignorant, but she handles herself very well.
Yeah.
She doesn't explode, and she speaks with proper respect.
Calm and dignified, and she politely engages with the people that are essentially verbally abusing her.
Mm-hmm.
She just wants to get this out. She wants the light shined on this. And I hope we've done her a fraction of the justice that she actually deserves by explaining from her point of view that she is not the liar that she's portrayed to be.
I believe so.
So that's the end of what we've got here. So we'll catch you next time for the German part 3.
Thank you very much.